Martial World Teyvat Chapter 61b, Fantasy Fiction by Azazyel. The two sparrows turned slightly as they headed in their own different directions. Cloud Retainer's Masager seal going towards Jake's alchemy factory that had been encroached upon by the Joyous Union Sect, but their intrusion had been violently rebuffed by Cloud Retainer's disciples. But with Shenhe and Ganyu not being enough to keep the old monsters of the Joyous Union Sect suppressed, Cloud Retainer had to go there obviously, to send a very clear message. Ningguang's lips twitched as she noted that in sending a message to the impure sect that loved its dual cultivation, it was likely that Cloud Retainer was obviously going to help herself to a sample of the elixirs and pills Jake's alchemy factory was putting out each week. Morix's Masager seal. It's heading directly towards the abyss. There must be a divine demon or abyssal monster active, she muttered with a slight frown. But she took a deep breath knowing that Morix especially was skilled in suppressing and killing even the strongest of the abyssal monsters and demons that invaded their world. Then with the message sent, her lips curled in amusement at the golden message that Dory had sent asking about when another shipment of pelicans would be ready to be sold to the merchant queen of Sumeru. Sorry, little one. We need all the birds in the sky right now. Ningguang muttered with some amusement knowing that Dory would infer that the refusal was purely because Jake was on vacation, as many people in the Liyue Qixing and the neighboring clans thought was the case. A lie the Liyue Qixing would happily tell even if it held up to the truth as easily as water flowed through a sieve. But it kept things simple, which was the most important fact even beyond the truth itself. But beyond all this laid one crucial fact. The question is thus. Will Morix go to Inazuma, and give them a new island after he probably flattens part of Narukami Island when he starts throwing mountains? Or will Cloud Retainer just snatch them up? Ningguang mused in thought. Across the world was two figures standing at the edge of a large wooden balcony, with their view being the endless mountains and verdant rainforests surrounding Sumeru City. Both figures had long white hair with soft green tinges. But one figure had some light brown and red streaks in her hair as though showing how her lively hair was entering the fall itself, while the other's was as fresh and pure as spring. Our saplings are in position, but it seems that Jake and Keqing wish to remain in Inazuma for a week longer, Nahida said with amusement as she looked at her mother, Rukkhadevata. The elder goddess of wisdom chuckled with her own matching amusement before she spoke softly. We snuck a mist seed marked by a stalker beetle into Jake's shoes, and we always knew he was in Inazuma, to say nothing those foolish siblings thinking a powerful storm could block our dream walking. Nahida gave a soft shrug and said plainly. We have pretended to let others think our dream jumping can be blocked more easily than it actually is. However, although Jake's own mind is too divergent for us to walk his dreams with the defenses he passively has, that dream defense he has however makes it abundantly clear where he is at all times as we do our own spiritual walk around the Inazuma area. Not to mention the fact that we can track that seed, to say nothing of our spies. Nahida finished with amusement as Rukkhadevata slowly nodded. Liyue will take back Jake Barris. They have tasted the bounty his genius seemingly endlessly provides unless Inazuma does something extremely stupid like killing Jake to hide the secret. A snort rang out as Rukkhadevata added. Not that, it would work either. The massive food factory Jake made screams of his direct attention and work. Though this will be a strong lesson to Liyue that they cannot monopolize Jake unless a divine is watching him directly. Nahida gave a slight hum before asking rhetorically. The chances of Cloud Retainer or Morix directly taking Jake into their sects isn't low. However, therein lies the issue of how the Adepti would need to keep their disciples and elders from pulling their games with the Golden Goose. A soft hum of thought escaped Rukkhadevata before she sighed and muttered. Truly it is a misfortune to all that Jake didn't start his life here. The Academia would have nurtured him to his best form, and with the knowledge we have collected over the millennia Jake would have had a much better starting point. Nahida herself shrugged and said with some humor. If it wasn't for how we both are needed to keep the abyss in the desert and the splotches of abyssal taint in the jungle contained, I would sneak over to Liyue myself to try to collect the designs he left behind. Rukkhadevata's lips twitched and she said with a shake of her head. His house has assuredly been flipped over to check for his notes already. And regardless of whether it's Cloud Retainer or Ningguang, neither would share them so easily. With that, both goddesses remained silent as they took in their city built into a massive divine tree they and the other divines of Sumer had fed and kept as strong as possible for the last 2 millennia since the war on Celestia. Kaching and I on our little break were very productive in our dual cultivation as we had little better to do as we were still nominally prisoners of a sort. So I also used my build gun to rebuild the cultivation tanks I made previously in my first factory so we could have an impromptu Holy Land. Whenever we wanted to cultivate, which for Kaching was always. And I certainly wasn't going to say not to my beautiful purple-haired wife who wanted to snuggle up naked in a wet sauna to become stronger and live longer. This was exactly what I was doing with her as Kaching had just returned from her little sparring session with one of the Raiden siblings generals who were at the same tier of martial arts like Kaching was. While I had been practicing the gold element of the martial art of golden lightning hands, which complemented my martial art in the golden path, as I would enhance my body via treatments by absorbing pieces of spiritual gold to reinforce it. First, my skin was enhanced, which for me who was already in the first stage of martial arts/body cultivation, I already had a head start and my body refinement was going well. And I loved the golden lightning hands body refinement method because it was simply utterly fucking disgusting for me. Sure, it wasn't offensively the strongest martial art or body refinement method there was. But its cultivation method was dependent on me getting spiritual gold of high quantities and higher quality as I went higher with the body refinement method. And for me who could literally take spiritual gold and use processes like particle accelerators to make higher density and spiritually rich spiritual gold alloys. From the moment I saw it in the stack of martial arts and cultivation methods Yamiko gave us I was hooked. Not to mention how the lightning aspect of the gold element had a sort of holy tinge to it which was often the bane of abyssal monsters. So the last few days were going well besides the pink-haired fox woman coming over to check in on us every few hours to make sure I hadn't poisoned the water supply, or created a pox to wipe out the mortals. Or in other words, continue to be a menace. We had spent the last 4 days basically just cultivating in my case, while Kaching also did some sparring with her seniors. So Kaching, are you ready? I asked quietly as the pelican inside my modified spatial ring was finally built with Kaching who was sitting in my lap stiffening before she said quietly. I have been tagged by the Raiden siblings with their spiritual mark to say nothing of how you have the spiritual mark of Kitsune Saigu and Yamiko. We can't outrun them conventionally. I nodded slowly with a cold smile before I spoke. That is indeed the case. I realized that a plane in the air would be too easy of a target to say nothing of the powerful storm the gods have conjured up around their borders. But there is one thing they didn't account for. What is under the water itself? The pelican has several large propellers and is already atmosphere sealed so we can just go underwater. Kaching was silent for a moment before she spoke slowly. Jake, what about the sea monsters? To which I squeezed Kaching around the waist and said, the ship will already be moving fast underwater. And we can rise up out of the depths quickly and fly into the air if needed. It's our best bet in my mind unless you have a better plan. The goal was simple. Even if Yamiko and the gods themselves could track us. The trick was that they couldn't get several hundred meters below the water, be that their spiritual senses or their bodies were incapable of taking the pressure. But then Kaching sighed and said, Jake, you underestimate a god. They can take the deep water pressure. Especially the gods of Inazuma as they regularly need to fight abyssal monsters and demons who try to hide in the deepest darkest depths. I frowned before I took a deep breath and said. Then our best bet is to just outrun them while flying straight towards Liyue. Or we do something crazy like leading them towards a great monster or something. Taking a deep breath I exhaled and said. Either way. Me and you can't break the spiritual imprints on ourselves. Myself especially I can't break them at all until we are leaving as feeling the imprints breaking they will rush towards us.